recorded. So it is currently now being recorded for folks to know. We want to be sure that we are able to share this with folks who are not able to join Zoom, who do not have access. We're going to probably find a way to get it on YouTube. So just to let folks know, this will be recorded. If we do have any Zoom bombers, we will end the webinar immediately, and we will apologize now for that ahead of time. But again, it will end, and then you could email ny@nationalexpungementweek.org if there are questions that you wanted answered, and we can try to get that related to the defenders. We also want to let folks know that if you are going to ask questions in the Q&A chat, please, because again, your criminal record is very sensitive. We want to be sure that you're not specific with your question, like with your case. We're going to coordinate with the defenders if there is a specific question on your case, so that because this is a public event, we do not want, especially the public, to hear the details of your case, especially if it's an open case or, anything. Again, we don't want to harm your situation anymore. So that's just also another disclaimer for attendees. And again, before I kick off to the moderator, who's an amazing organizer with Fierce in Brooklyn, and he can talk a little bit more about himself. I'm going to kick us off because I believe we like to just these webinars become a little boring. Just liven us up with a little music. So I have an amazing friend that unfortunately he's not here to do live, but he did share a video that he posted today, and I thought it was great, and I hope you enjoy it. And just for 2 minutes before we actually go into our webinar. So enjoy. This is Baba Israel.
Word up, Grand Rising.
Mad love to mankind with the vibe. Baba Israel in the place. I'ma spit a whole song. Life is stressful, so we do it like this. Hey yo, raw drum, raw tongue, don't spit venom. Spirit searching, emerging from the shadows. Bad blows from the 5-0. Sad road survival. Some hold the Bible, some hold the rival. I hold the mic with a recital that's vital. No idol worship, no devotion to the worship. My diverse dispersed the wordless. This earth is our sacred home. Can we make it home? I see the tension building, feeling the flames fan. Is this our last stand? Man, I'm hanging at the bandstand with my man Stan. What's the plan? Same as it ever was. Take action, love and compassion. It was never easy. The journey got me uneasy, easy, not breezy. Wishing I was in Fiji or Tahiti. Not to be greedy or seedy, I just need a break from this all-out assault. I'm reaching deep in the vault, speaking the raw, teaching the law of the universe. In the verse each day, a lesson is learned, a blessing is earned. I'm stressing, investing, discern, expressing concern like Senator Bernie. Always good to know when to turn me. Know what's on the other side before you turn the key. I'm burning herbally with the urgency. It's an emergency. Turn to see the world to be or the world to cease. What have we done to increase the peace? Decrease the police, release the grief. Cease to beat each one, teach one. That's why we say peace, son. Peace ain't the word to play. It's the word to lay deep in your heart today. Hard to say, but we all have our part to play. Practice kindness, my man. We gotta start today. Hey yo, peace ain't the word to play. It's the word to lay deep in your heart today. Hard to say, but we all have our part to play. Practice kindness, y'all. We gotta start today. Hey yo, I'm a veteran of the lettering of the lyric spirit. Let it in. Face my biggest hurdles like a turtle reticent. Hesitant, found the medicine. Jettison, energy, Edison. Solar power, solar flower. Each petal I meddle in. Black in the melanin, same skeleton. For some it's hell again. Red hats, no redemption. I'm feeling the tension. Lines drawn and rhymes formed to calm the mind storm. Peace is holding strong when it's all going wrong. It's the soul in the song, the flow in the form, the growing and knowing when you're wrong. It's knowing you belong, and together we're strong. Grand rising, grand rising, grand rising. Feel my energy and feel my vibing, cause it's vibrant. Shout out to mankind. We in the struggle, y'all, and it's love, y'all, and it's peace, y'all.
I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did when I heard it this morning. I hope it got us a little in it. And I know said I was going to pass it to our moderator, but before I do that, I'd like to give our assemblyman in the 74th District, Harvey Epstein, 2 minutes to talk about the amazing things he's doing in Albany, especially around a lot of things, marijuana, clean slate, you know, bail reform. So, everybody, please welcome Assemblyman Harvey Epstein.
Thank you, Pilar, and thank you for all you're doing in our city and the work you're committed to. This is an important week to talk about expungement. And I have to say that we've done some really good things in Albany over the past year, but we've done some really terrible things as well. And like the rollbacks on bail that we did this year were horrible, and I voted against the budget because of the choices that the governor pushed down people's throats to say that we want to incarcerate mostly black and brown people in New York. But this message is a message of opportunity. We need to talk about how we create a decarceral state, how we continue to change how we view criminal justice, how we talk about economic and social struggle. And this is a conversation about us. It's not a conversation of what they did. So we have a lot to do in Albany. We have a lot to do together. And expungement of records is just a small part of our larger puzzle. We need to talk about how we change the criminal justice system in total, how we defund policing, how we change how we view policing in the United States. As people know, the police, 95% of what the police do don't require police officers. It requires social workers and mental health providers and substance abuse counselors. And we give billions and billions of dollars to our police when we know that resources need to go to different places. Why are there not social workers going to places? The kid in Utah who got shot now a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, the mom called 911 to say, hey, my kid's has a mental health breakdown. We need some support. They came with police, and the police shot like 10 times at this kid, you know? The Breonna Taylor stuff today. Time and time again, police are being used where they don't deserve to be, where they shouldn't be, where our government money shouldn't be. So expungement is a really important thing, but the over-policing in our society and the change of the criminal justice system are critical things that we all need to work on today. I'm happy to co-sponsor this event. I'm happy to push forward to legalization of cannabis, but we won't do it unless we ensure that the money goes to communities and communities of color that have been historically discriminated for decades. We can't let what we did with medical marijuana happen with cannabis. Medical marijuana, 10 companies, white-owned companies across the state, making millions and potentially billions of dollars to the white community when the community of color have been incarcerated for decades. Expungement is about change. Expungement is like forgiveness. And we have to look at our history and change what we've done. I'm really proud to be here with you all. Thank you for all you being here. I'm happy to be helpful if I can be. And Paula, thank you for letting me speak in this important issue.
Thank you. Thank you again for joining us. And again, thank you to all the panelists that are here. They are amazing folks that are here. And I also want to recognize Tamika Mapp, who is also here. I believe, Tamika, you are new, and we'll give you some time a little later to speak because I don't want to fall off the agenda, but want to recognize you here, new state committee woman. Am I saying that right? Am I wrong?
No, you're right.
Okay, yeah, so new state committee here in the 68 Assembly District. So congratulations on your win this past couple of months ago during COVID. So I'm out of here, guys. I'm gonna pass it on to your moderator for today. Again, I'll be back at the end for some little, thank yous. But forgive me again. If I say your name, Mustafa. I am from Fierce, and if you don't know about Fierce, he's gonna tell you. And so he will be moderating this lovely panel this afternoon. And so, thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Mustafa Sullivan. I'm the executive director of Fierce. For those who haven't heard about Fierce, it's a 20-year-old organization that works to organize young lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender young people of color, ages 12 to 25. And what that work entails is support in their own leadership development. Many of our members are folks who get pushed out of schools due to abuse, not out of schools, but out of schools, out of their homes, out of their families of origin due to abuse or violence or neglect. And we create an opportunity for them to build a cohesive family unit, to provide support, like connecting them to the right referral networks. And we do quite a lot of work supporting young homeless young people. Approximately 70% of our members are homeless, whether that means living on the streets or not having a home of their own to call like a place of living. They might be couch surfing, they might be literally going from shelter to shelter or living in the streets. And so we know that means that they're over policed, and we have many young people that we each year support by providing legal advocacy and doing jail support, as well as, you know, meeting with elected officials and fighting them on policing issues. And we've had I've had a 20-year history of fighting elected officials on policing and expungement and these issues. But we're not gonna talk about that right this second. I'm gonna introduce you all to our first panelist from Bronx Defenders, Roy Waterman III. Just so folks know, Bronx Defenders has a long history in the Bronx of supporting poor and low-income folks of color by providing legal support. Roy Waterman comes to Bronx Defenders as an advocate for justice who works on educating and mobilizing the masses around issues impacting people who have been intercepted by the criminal legal system. His mission in life is to bring a humanizing perspective to people not impacted by the CLS, criminal legal system. Roy has engaged and educated communities around the nation on how they can better support and provide opportunities for people reintegrating back into the society from incarceration. So give a round of applause, snaps, whatever you got where you are, to Roy Waterman III.
Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction. As was mentioned, I'm Roy Waterman, and I am the Reintegration Reentry Coordinator at the Bronx Defenders. And the Bronx Defenders, in case, as I like to tell people, unless you've been living under a rock, we serve the greater Bronx community, and we provide resources and services to countless residents in the Bronx by using a holistic defense, because we realized very quickly that most of the time, most people don't have one issue. They might have an issue that might be involved with the criminal legal system, which ultimately might land them in family court, or which ultimately might land them in immigration court or civil court. So we try to address it using cross-practice methods and like trying to use a web, if you will, infrastructure to like aid, assist the community, but also hold those in power accountable. So we sue everybody, as you might have heard and as you might know. We sue people, and it seems like they don't respect it until you start talking about money. So we sue people for our clients, and we try to make things happen, or to try to pass policy more than anything. And my role is to assist folks coming home from jails and prisons, as well as when they're upstate about to come home, reintegrate back into society. There are countless barriers that people face when they're coming home, and a lot of times those barriers are stop signs, red lights. All those signs are like red flags. And also, a lot of people don't know, it kind of re-traumatizes individuals, right? Like this trauma they've been through, a lot of individuals have not been healed from the things they've experienced or things they've been through, right? So now in turn, we throw those same people, we allow them to come on the street, and we don't create a system, a support. Parole is not supporting people on the level it's supposed to be. Community is not supporting people, because a lot of times we like to other people, but instead we need to start talking to people, because contrary to popular belief, most people do not get locked up and the key gets thrown away. Most people come right back into your community. So now you have to ask yourself, don't you want people to come home a better, stronger version of themselves, more predictive, more productive members, having aid to endless resources, not being discriminated against when they're being employed or when they're looking for anything else. Felony conviction is the scarlet letter of the 21st century. And I often tell people, because I am a formerly incarcerated man, that it never goes away no matter how much good you do. So I'm glad this is National Expungement Week. You invited me to this. This is right up my alley, and I'm going to be quiet now.
I mean, yeah, I think, Roy, though, you could feel free to start, going on ahead and really talking about what reentry looks like here in New York. And then, we'll go on to the next speakers after, you
Sure.
like,
Absolutely.
like.
Absolutely, no problem. So the shifts of reentry, which has happened, especially during and post-COVID. So like prior to COVID, the focus of when it came to reentry was employment, vocational training, And pretty much that was it, right? We didn't like emphasize therapy and counseling. We didn't emphasize social and emotional learning. We didn't emphasize job readiness before we put people actually in employment situations. I don't care how, like, it doesn't matter how good the job is. If a person is not trained on how to work in the workplace, if they're not like aware of the impact of Me Too in the 21st century and how to speak to women in the workplace, then more than likely that person's going to have that job for 2 seconds and get fired. So a lot of reentry now, and like even like I would say even previously to COVID and now after, it's not just like doing job readiness. It's not just like, oh, providing PPE and providing gloves and hand sanitizer. But I will also tell people that one of the necessities now with reentry, now there's a mandate, in my personal opinion, based off of what I've seen with clients and countless clients around the city with other organizations, are cell phones. As much as we like brush off like how important cell phones are to us as individuals, when you leave home without a cell phone, you kind of feel naked, right? You go throughout your day, you're thinking like, damn, I gotta go back home, get my cell phone. Well, imagine if you're a person that's been removed from society for an extended amount of time, or even a year or whatever, and now you come home and you're on parole and your PO's telling you, oh, you can't have a cell phone, and you have no idea how to use a cell phone, how to call someone, you have no idea how to use a Metro card. All these things we assume people know are all learned behaviors. So reentry is about unlearning some things to learn some new things. And how you do that is like the systems that exist now, we have to reimagine what it looks like. For a lot of people, and I've spoken to countless parole officers around the city in trainings, I always tell them, you are, for a lot of people, the first and only means of support. So that means you have a lot of power that you don't really even know you have. And for some people, you're the only person that they can go to say, I need something. Like, I don't have anything. So we have to realize that when we're thinking about expungement, when we think about people coming home, a felony conviction, like I said earlier, it doesn't come off your record. So now when you're thinking about expungement, particularly when you're thinking about an automated version of expungement, when I say automated, I mean that a person doesn't have to fill out an application. A person doesn't have to pay for an application. A person doesn't have to send a fingerprint. Just kind of like how similar to like most of us who have auto pay, every time of the month, that money comes out no matter what, even if we don't want it to come out a lot of times. This is the place where we need to get to when we're thinking about automation on all the processes that are impacting people who are returning home every day from jail and from prisons. They should not have to be filling out applications for CREs, for stealing, for even if we create this bill, expungement. So we are working on this bill in coalition with the Clean Slate Act, and we are like been working and fighting and having conversations, having listening sessions, and actually having conversations with people like myself who are also directly impacted, because we firmly believe that you cannot be guided or led in any sort of policy legislation without having the advice or guidance of those who are most impacted by the problem. It doesn't matter if the problem is the criminal legal system, if it's immigration, if it's family court, if whatever it is, you should have individuals who are impacted by their system sharing their experiences, because a lot of times they actually have the answers to the problem, but they don't have the opportunity or the forum to share what it is they've been through to like funnel through that. So reentry in post-COVID is a lot of it has a lot to do with social and emotional support. A lot of it has to do with therapy and counseling. It had a lot to do it before, but let's think about all of us right now on this call. We've been working remotely probably for months and months. If you're like me and us at BXD, we've been working remotely since February, and it's been challenging. We deal with clients, we deal with people, but now we have to deal with people through a screen. We have to deal with people on a cell phone. There's no longer human interaction, and in turn it's causing a raise in stress, anxiety, domestic violence. So all these things I always like to tell people, it's okay to not be okay right now. This is not like a moment we've seen before. And if you're a person that's coming home from jail and from prison, you already have in your mind all the barriers you have to deal with. So now you have to deal with COVID. So as I said before, we're working on like thinking about what does it look like in the 21st century post-COVID on providing cell phones for every client, for provide like how do you do instructional trainings when it comes to job readiness before you actually put people in employment situations. I know employment's a need, but is employment more of a need than a person continuously getting fired until ultimately they get frustrated, until ultimately they might go back to what they know how to do best, right? Which might ultimately land them in the criminal legal system again. So how do we minimize those barriers? We have to provide paid opportunities to folks as well. We can't expect people to put down guns, knives, or whatever and do the right thing just for the sake of doing the right thing. There needs to be collateral in place for young people, for older people. We need to like incentivize two folks like, listen, we know, listen, you're going through this, you were taught the wrong thing, you're taught a certain way, not even the wrong thing. You were taught a certain way because there is no right or wrong when it comes to how you were raised. I personally believe. I believe you were raised based off of what you experienced and what people taught you. So if you were raised a certain way in a certain environment, that's the environment you know. So that is your right thing to do. For some people, their right thing to do is to sell drugs. Their right thing to do is to pull a gun on someone based off of what they were taught. It's a learned behavior. So a lot of reentry is about unlearning behavior. And as well as always, I'll make this point in closing before I jump back in probably later, is that reentry starts the day of arrest. It does not start the day when you get your sentence. It doesn't start the day when you're about to come home, or it doesn't start when they put you through those pre-release programs before you come home. It starts the day you're incarcerated. And we know the Department of Corrections is not suited to provide the educational level, the vocational level. So a lot of things when you're incarcerated have to be self-help, have to be self-motivated. I'm a man that spent almost 13 years in prison. A lot of the things I did were because I was self-motivated. I had to take my own college courses and pay out of my pocket. And there are countless men and women who are experiencing the same thing. So I'll just pause right there because I could keep going, but I'll pause.
Thank you for everything that you just offered, Roy. You know, one thing that resonates with me really strongly is this idea that reentry is a real process and support system for people, and not, you know, like sometimes people think, oh, just get them a job, or oh, just get them this or whatever. But it really is, you know, a level of support that maybe people are not used to getting. People may be uncomfortable with, and or, you know, a lot of times folks are scared to ask, you know, like people don't, you know, you get locked up, you get arrested, and you don't even want to reach out to people because you might feel embarrassed or ashamed, or other traumas come up for you.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that resonated with me. Do any of the other panelists want to offer anything before we go to the next speaker?
Something I would like to add, you know, when you were talking about barriers, Roy, something during this process of being part of National Expungement Week, and it really blew my mind, the number. There are 48,000 barriers one faces if you have a criminal record. And it really does not matter how minor that is. So the reentry part becomes even a little bit more challenging because of that. You cannot get access to housing, becomes a lot more challenging, access to employment. Access, let's say you want to create generational wealth for your family. Access to owning your own business becomes a barrier. So access to education. So literally it creates all these barriers to technically go back into the ways to survive in the ways that got you in that system. So it's a really unfortunate cycle. And I like to share this before I be quiet again. One of the most outrageous ones that I recently read, and I like to use this as my go-to. You cannot call a game of bingo here in New York State if you have a record, no matter how minor it is. I don't know all the details, what like minor means, but from what I read, it's like it could be anything. And so if my abuela asks me to go to bingo with her and asks me to be the one to be like B58 or whatever the numbers are, I could not do that. And so it's like you can't even enjoy family time with your family. So, yeah.
Yes. Like as was mentioned, when you're thinking about those the perpetual punishment, because we like to use the term collateral consequences a lot. But I would challenge people to even shift that language we use, because I believe that language is very important to the narrative. The language we use when we're describing people who are directly impacted and not using the term inmate, felon, or describing people by a crime, we simply describe a person by a person that's in prison, a person that committed a crime. The main point is to emphasize people, person, because when we allow the noun or whatever it is to supersede who the person is, it makes it so much easier for us to discard the person like an object. And that's what the criminal legal system is. It is about capturing, absorbing bodies of color and like spitting them out, just waiting for them to come back within a 3-year period. And about 70% or so are coming back in a 3-year period. Not for new arrest though. That's the key. They're coming back for parole violations, which are not actually breaking the law, which are like very like minute rules, like pass your curfew, like oh, you didn't tell me you got a license and you're driving, so I'll violate you. Like these type of things are the things why people are being violated for and being sent back. Marijuana is a prime example. You can get a marijuana card in New York right now and go to a dispensary and buy marijuana, but a person on parole, it's a different ballgame. So we have to, all those consequences when we factor in is why we're here talking about expungement, because there needs to be a place and a time when your time is over. I've been released from prison for over 11 years. I've started nonprofits. I've worked at a lot of organizations, educated a lot of people around this country. But at the end of the day, I still have 3 felonies. No matter what I do, I still have 3 felonies. So expungement needs to exist for countless people that look like me, who sound like me. I am just a physical representation of countless men and women who could be sitting here talking to you right now because of opportunity. And we need to provide opportunity to the countless men and women, and we're not doing that enough.
Thank you again, Roy, for your wisdom and your, I don't know what it took for you to be here, but I really appreciate your voice and what you have to offer. Our next speaker is also from Bronx Defenders. Eli Northup is the policy counsel under criminal defense practice at Bronx Defenders. Eli graduated cum laude from New York University School of Law in 2011. After graduating, Eli clerked for judges in the District Court for the Southern District of New York and on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. He then received his LLM in trial advocacy from Georgetown University, where he served as an E. Barrett Pretty Man Fellow in the Criminal Defense and Prisoner Advocacy Clinic, handling misdemeanor and felony cases in Washington, D.C. Superior Court and supervising third-year law students. While in law school, Eli interned in public defender offices in Harlem, the Bronx, New Orleans, and Washington, D.C., as well as at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. He received a BA in psychology with a concentration in Law and Society from Cornell University in 2007. Eli has been working at the Bronx Defenders since 2015, where he handles both felony and misdemeanor cases and is a member of the policy team. Give some praise and applause for Eli.
Thank you, Mustafa. Way too much information in that bio, but thank you, and thank you, Pilar, for having me, and thank you, Roy, for setting this topic up. And I think you kind of provided a nice segue into what I'm going to talk about, which is really sealing and expungement in marijuana cases specifically. And I'm going to use a PowerPoint here, so just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen, see if this works. Can you guys see the PowerPoint? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay. So, you know, in New York State, we don't really have expungement. And the one area we do have actual expungement in New York State is in marijuana cases. And that's actually a result of a bill that was just passed last year. So this is kind of an experiment in expungement for New York State. And I kind of want to talk to you guys about what that looks like, how it's been going. and also other elements of the marijuana expungement law, because there are certain different parameters for people who deal with immigration issues. And I also want to talk a little bit about the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, which is a bill that's currently pending that would legalize marijuana and provide for investments in communities that have been most affected, and opportunity for people in communities that have been most affected to participate in the economy that's created. So I think there's a poll up right now.
Sorry, that was a boo-boo on my end.
Oh, it's okay.
Gone away.
Are you guys seeing the poll still?
No, I see your screen.
All right. So for some reason, I can't see, the poll is still in my screen. So let me try to, okay. I got it. Okay. So sorry about that. So let's just talk about what expungement looks like in marijuana cases. So as I mentioned, in 2019, the legislature actually passed a decriminalization and expungement bill for marijuana. And what that bill said was that if you had a conviction for a small amount of marijuana, these were convictions under Penal Law 22105 and 22110, which was basically up to 25 grams of marijuana at that point. If you had a conviction for a low-level marijuana offense, it's automatically expunged. And they said that it was going to be automatically expunged by July 29th of 2020, which already passed. So what does that mean? So what does expungement mean as opposed to sealing or some other terminology? An expungement means that the court, arrest, prosecution, and criminal history records related to the convictions are confidential and can't be seen by anyone except for two scenarios. And that's if you're trying to apply for a job in law enforcement, or if you're applying to basically get a gun. Expungement means the case was terminated in your favor and it's a nullity. Only in the marijuana context does expungement exist. So if you had a conviction in New York State for marijuana, or if you get a conviction under this law going forward, it will be expunged automatically. You don't have to do anything. It just happens. What does it, I just like to show this because people are like, well, what's 25 grams? So it used to be that the law was, it would be a misdemeanor if you possessed more than 25 grams. So 25 grams is a little bit less than an ounce. You can now possess up to 2 ounces of marijuana before it becomes a criminal offense. So basically twice as much as you could before. And you can kind of see on this picture what that looks like. So this is what they promised us. This is what the legislature promised us in terms of what they were going to do about marijuana convictions. And for the most part, they did what they said that they were going to do. If you had a conviction that was only for low-level marijuana offense, that was the only thing on the docket you were charged with, they expunged that. And that's already expunged, and it should be automatically expunged already. If you were arrested and you were charged with marijuana and something else, but the marijuana conviction was the top charge that you were convicted of, they were also able to expunge that, and that will be automatically expunged. It should be automatically expunged right now. But because of a defect in their computer systems, if you were charged with a more serious charge and also marijuana, they can't just go in and remove the marijuana conviction and expunge that marijuana conviction because of the way that their computer systems work. And actually, the Office of Court Administration has said that they need an overhaul of their systems to do this. They said that they have some sort of workaround where they can try to seal these convictions, but they aren't actually expunged in the same way. So that's just something to be aware of. Honestly, the first two categories constitute 95% of all cases. But in those remaining 5%, if you were convicted of, let's say, some sort of felony, but also there was a marijuana conviction, the marijuana conviction is not expunged in the same way or in the way that it should be. And that's a result of something being wrong with the computer system.
Technology.
Right. So just earlier this week, the Office of Court Administration in New York courts came out with an application for people if they want to destroy the records of in a case for a marijuana conviction. So just because a marijuana conviction is expunged, it doesn't mean that those records are destroyed. That takes another step. And you are entitled to have records destroyed if you have a conviction that's expunged. And you can do that by going to the New York court's website and filling out an application. But there is something to think about before you ask to get the records expunged. And as you see, there's kind of a disclaimer on the website. Basically, if you ask and apply for all of these records to get expunged, and somehow, somewhere down the line, this previous conviction pops up by accident in some sort of application or some sort of record search, they won't be able to confirm that the conviction was vacated and expunged if they destroy the records. All of that's to say is there is a risk to having the records destroyed. And if you are thinking about making that application, if you're interested in it, it really makes sense to consult with an attorney before going through that application process. So there's a different scenario for people that are non-citizens, and because marijuana is governed by state law and the immigration laws are federal laws. So even if a case is expunged, even if a marijuana conviction is expunged, it may not be sufficient for immigration purposes for people that are thinking about applying for citizenship. There's a different process that this new law that was enacted last year creates, and it's a vacatur process. That eliminates the conviction in a way that immigration agencies would recognize. So for people that are interested in who have a marijuana conviction, marijuana, as we talked about, as Roy mentioned, perpetual punishment, collateral consequences, it's very seriously taken still in the immigration context. And people can be placed in deportation proceedings because of a single marijuana conviction. And even though their conviction is now automatically expunged, it may not be enough if somebody is put in deportation proceedings. So that's why there's a different process that was created, a vacatur process. And basically what this says is that if you were convicted for this low-level marijuana offense, there's a presumption that it wasn't knowing, voluntary, intelligent, and that it constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. So especially if it has immigration consequences. What it requires to vacate that conviction is an application. So it's not automatic. It requires an application and it's submitted to the court. So if somebody is in a situation where a marijuana conviction is affecting their citizenship status or is affecting them in some way because of immigration, it makes sense to consult with an attorney and to start that process to have that conviction vacated. Even though it was already automatically expunged, it's a different process. So there's some resources for non-citizens from across the city. And if you're in this situation or if you know anybody in this situation, you can reach out to these organizations. The Bronx Defenders works with people in the Bronx. The rest of these organizations work citywide, I believe, and speak to an attorney about taking steps to have your conviction vacated. The last thing I just want to talk about quickly is the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, which I mentioned before, and a number of the other panelists on this panel, we're part of a coalition. Our organizations are part of a coalition called the Start Smart Coalition, which is a coalition of over 90 organizations statewide, community organizations, legal organizations that are working to try to pass this legalization of marijuana, but legalizing marijuana in a way that actually provides justice, that provides reinvestment in communities that have been affected for years, that repairs harm in those communities, that provides opportunities, not just legalizing it like like Assemblymember Epstein mentioned, and just having outside business people come in and take over the economy, but doing it the right way. But another part of the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act is that it would automatically expunge a lot more marijuana convictions. Right now, it's only really low-level convictions that are automatically expunged. The Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act would expunge every misdemeanor marijuana conviction as well as certain felony convictions. So another reason to push for this is that it provides for broader expungement. And if you're interested in knowing more about marijuana legalization and that, there's a website, Start Smart NY. You could just Google Start Smart NY and get involved with that and pushing for marijuana legalization. I'm going to stop here and happy to answer questions about stuff I spoke about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eli. Does anyone on the panel have any questions, comments?
I guess I just have a comment, again, thank you, Eli, for all that information. There is a question in the chat. Someone would like a copy of the presentation.
Right, James, if you want to provide your email address to Pilar, I can reach out to you. Also, it'll be part of the video recording, obviously, yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess just one comment I want to make, in regards to the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act. I am one of those members on the coalition that sits with Eli. And so we've spent many times in Albany talking to many elected officials, many rallies. And, one thing that's really important for folks who are watching, especially depending what community you are watching from here in New York City, and especially now than ever, it's going to be so, so, so important for the community to share what community reinvestment looks like for real, because the legislators are ready to take the profits from this money and, pretty much do what they do with it. And in other states that have been legalized with recreation, the police always end up getting a percentage, and the minimal percentage usually is 30%. And me personally, in my opinion, here in New York State, the officers should not be getting nowhere nearly that amount. And when I led the community reinvestment group in the coalition, and we were really uniformed with the people who were there, police should not, get money. We know that we're going to have a problem because they're going to say, who's going to enforce the law, yada, yada, yada. But it's really important for folks who are here watching to really get involved, especially now, because people who have been the most affected and the people who have been doing this for a long time, all you people who have been there, what we like to call the God, I forgot the name, the legacy market. You guys have been doing this for the longest time, right? We should be the one that I prioritize when we talk about how do we get our revenue, how do we own businesses in this industry that now in other states, it's being looked at as an essential need. And so please get involved. Community reinvestment, especially coming up, is more so important because this coming year they're already talking. Oh, marijuana makes a lot of money. If people do not know, New York State smokes the most marijuana in the world. We smoke 79 metric tons of weed. So yeah, and if anybody else, before we move on and again back up, if anybody else from the coalition that's here, if they want to add.
Well, no, Pilar, there's a lot of questions that are showing up in the chat to give Eli time to answer them because, it's about 3 questions and they're in the chat.
Yeah, I thank you, Raeblin. Let me address, James, I think had a question about wouldn't expungement be assumed if the arrest were solely for possession of small amounts? And you would think that in New York State, we'd be at that point. It wasn't until this bill passed last year that expungement existed at all for any charge in New York. And so only as of this year did they start automatically expunging convictions for Penal Law 22105 and 22110, which is basically possession for small amounts of marijuana. So now we can make that assumption, but we couldn't make that assumption until now. And Andres said, can a felony charge be expunged? As of now, it doesn't provide for expungement for felony marijuana offenses. I know that Emma and Avery are going to talk a little bit more about what sealing looks like in New York State and how hard it is to actually get any offenses sealed. But expungement only exists in New York State for low-level marijuana offenses. And that's part of the reason, that it's so important to pass these bills like Clean Slate and the MRTA, which would actually provide for felony expungement. And then, yes, Raybon, this is a final one. Would you explain some of the initiatives that Start Smart is taking to give back to the communities that have been most negatively impacted by policing in regards to marijuana? Well, what's the most impactful, important? So what Start Smart does, the Start Smart Coalition is trying to get this MRTA bill passed. And what the MRTA bill does is it takes the revenue from marijuana sales, the tax revenue from the marijuana sales, and it makes sure that a portion of that revenue is directly invested into the communities that have been most targeted. And the comptroller did actually a study of the communities that have been targeted for marijuana arrests. And there's a list of the communities and the neighborhoods that have had the most arrests disproportionately. And what the bill does is it says, oh, governor can't take this and put it in his slush fund. This doesn't just go to the general tax pool. This goes directly into these specific communities. And that's been one of the biggest difficulties in getting this bill passed, is that there's pushback from other people who want to just use the tax revenue for other things. And so as a coalition, we've been standing strong and saying, no, if you do marijuana legalization, you need to do it the right way. You need to do it in a just way. It has to go back into these specific communities. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Eli. Are there any other responses, questions from anyone else before we move on to the next speakers?
Yes, I'm just gonna take the mic on as being to answer Pilar's question about what is Start Smart, what are the other things that Start Smart is doing. So my name is Raybon Vargas, and in the Start Smart Coalition, I've been working on building the cooperative movement to help create a just economic recovery arm of legislation so that our communities will be able to get technical support, financing, low interest, zero interest loans, so that we can catch up and have the leverage and able to enter the market. So, for us, like Pilar was talking about, so the legacy market community are able to enter the legal market with all the resources and the capacity support that standard white businesses have already, just because of 500 years of slavery and white supremacy. But anyway, we are very actively working on that. And one of the things that we're very proud of is that last year, after 2 years of work, we now have a cooperative business license that our people in the community can apply for. And we're making sure that our people are able to not only get the license, but get the legal support, the training, the lawyers, the accountants, everything that we have right now in New York City's robust cooperative community be a statewide mandate. So with that, I just want to complete with that, but we are continuing that work moving forward. And for anybody that's interested in joining Start Smart New York, there are so many other departments. We have education, outreach, the cooperative community reinvestment, which Pilar chairs that work group. We have reforming criminal justice. We have so many roles that you can play to make sure that when marijuana is legalized, it's not off of our backs, it's for our own empowerment and reparations. And thank you.
Thank you, Raybon. That's so important for our communities, right? Like, I had no idea. I can't even remember the amount of tons was said about like marijuana.
74 metric tons.
84 metric tons?
74.
74. Oh, I added 10 tons. 10 metric tons.
At this point, it probably is about 10. After COVID, we probably reached 100.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the reality is that, you know, they're constantly trying to cut us out. So it's so important that our businesses and we have the opportunity to know the laws that the reality of the laws that Eli pointed out, and the cooperative business opportunities, and us pushing like Rayblen and the Smart Start coalition has worked on. So our next two folks, I'm going to introduce them, who are going to be giving us some more context to this conversation. And Emma Goodman is a staff attorney at the Criminal Defense Practice of Legal Aid Society. Emma is an experienced criminal defense attorney at Legal Aid, specializing in record sealing and expungement. She began her career working for 7 years as a fully certified trial attorney in the Manhattan office before moving to the Special Litigation Unit in 2017. During her time as a trial lawyer, Emma witnessed firsthand the injustices of the criminal system and the collateral consequences suffered by people with criminal records. When New York's criminal record sealing law went into effect in October 2017, Emma found a case closed, an initiative aimed at raising awareness about the law, helping people seal their criminal records, and advocating for broader and better record clearance laws in New York and beyond. And also, we'll be hearing from Avery Bazell, who is a community organizer at Community Service Society. Avery works under the CSS's legal department, organizing the Clean Slate New York campaign, which seeks passage of legislation in New York State to expunge state conviction records. Avery also oversees CSS's New York Reentry Roundtable, a quarterly forum that brings together reentry advocates from across the state to formulate strategies to make reintegration smoother by changing minds and changing laws. Avery brings a wealth of community organizing skills and experience, from organizing cafeteria workers while a student at Morehouse to working as an organizing fellow for SEIU 32BJ, for organizing and training people of color at the Center for Third World Organizing, and all stops in between. Avery is also a member of Black Youth Project 100, where he currently serves as the C4 board representative for the New York City chapter. So give a warm round of applause to Emma and Avery.
Thank you, Mustafa. And thank you, Pilar, and everyone for having me on. So I'm going to do the kind of boring part of explaining what sealing looks like in New York right now. And then Avery is going to do more interesting and exciting and hopeful part of the Clean Slate Initiative, and hopefully what expungement will look like in New York in the near future. So just so you all know, Mustafa said, I am an attorney at the Legal Aid Society. I've filed hundreds of sealing applications since the law went into effect a few years ago. So if you have questions about sealing, I think, and you specifically are looking to get your records sealed, I think Pilar is going to gather information from people and then send it around to me and other defenders to make sure that all of your questions get answered. And if you need representation, we can represent you. Don't ask us any specific questions about your record in this forum, because it's a public forum and we don't want anybody to know your business. So just email her directly at the email she just put up, NY at National Expungement Week, and we will make sure your questions get answered. All right, next slide, Avery. Okay, so the sealing law in New York is CPL 16059. It was passed in 2017. It's an application-based system. It's not automatic. So unlike the marijuana law that Eli was just talking about, you have to apply to the court. I'll go through briefly what that means. I'm not going to go into too much detail. It would be better if it were not an application, is a safe thing to say. The eligibility is pretty limited. I'll go through that too. And it's just very complicated. It's very slow. We think hundreds of thousands of people are eligible under CPL 16059, and just over 2,000 people have had their records sealed in 3 years at this point. So that tells you how hard it is to get your records sealed and how little people actually are able to do it, even if they are eligible. And that's not even counting the millions of people that should be able to get their record sealed, but can't because the law is too limited. Next slide. Okay, so I know this is very long. Luckily, it's all being recorded. So you don't need to memorize anything. And again, you can reach out to me and other people to talk this through. But the basic eligibility requirements are 2 convictions total in your lifetime. So that means you get 3 theft of services turnstile jumps from the 80s. Those are convictions. They're misdemeanors, but they're convictions. You're out. You can't get anything sealed. So that's what I'm talking about when I say this law is so limited. It's maximum of 2 convictions. I'm talking about adult convictions, not juvenile ones or violations. You can have up to 1 felony, and it has to be at least 10 years since the last conviction you had. So no convictions at all for 10 years, maximum of 2 convictions. You can't have any pending cases. And then there are a bunch of exclusions. So it sounds great that you can get a felony sealed. In reality, all violent felonies, all sex offenses, Class A felonies, attempts to commit those things, those are all excluded offenses. It means you can't get them sealed. There is a complicated thing where if one of them comes first and then you get a misdemeanor later that is eligible to seal, you could apply to seal the later one. Again, this is a reason why it's complicated and why a lot of people have not applied, because it's hard to know if you're eligible. Even if you just have 2 convictions, it's hard to know if you're eligible. Next slide. Okay, so the application process, like I said, is complicated. You have to submit an application to the court. You're supposed to be able to file it pro se, meaning like on your own. But the courts have made it, even pre-COVID, very complicated for people to actually do it on their own. And a lot of the time, we have people calling us that filed the applications, they followed all the right steps, but the courts are still giving them problems. So having to file the application, even just going to the courthouse and figuring that out is complicated. It's also traumatizing for people to have to re-enter that courthouse and go through that process when the last time they were there was potentially one of the worst days of their lives. So making people do that is one of the things that we would very much like to avoid by making it automatic. But this is where we are now. You have to serve a copy on the DA and the court. And then there are a couple of things you have to include. One of them is a copy of your certificate of disposition from your case. And the other is a sworn statement, which is basically something saying, a personal statement saying why you think your record should be sealed. And that has to be notarized. Another way that even though the process is free, it still costs money because people have to pay for notaries if they're trying to do it on their own. Most courts are now accepting applications. As I said, this is all pretty complicated, and there, especially in New York City, is a ton of free legal assistance available if you are trying to seal your record. So you should not be shy about calling legal aid, Bronx Defenders, lots of Community Service Society, which is where Avery's from. A lot of places are doing these applications and would be happy to help and help you navigate the system. Next slide. All right, so a little more about the application process. This law is not very well written, but the DA has 45 days to oppose once you file the application. If the DA opposes, there will be a hearing in front of a judge. This is in criminal court, there will be a hearing. If you have filed on your own and you're gonna have a hearing because the DA opposed your application, you should definitely call a lawyer because this is like a real hearing in criminal court. You don't wanna be trying to figure out how this is gonna work on your own. And again, there's lots of legal help available. The judge makes the final decision, and then we are getting cases sealed, but very, very slowly because of COVID. So things are up and running, but only a little bit, not the way they used to be. So things are slow. Next slide. So another thing about the application-based system is that you can't really trust that just because a judge says your case is sealed, that the case is actually sealed. It has to be sealed in 2 places. It has to be sealed by the court, And then the court sends a notification to Albany, which is DCJS, the Division of Criminal Justice Services, to tell them to seal it there. Sometimes the court doesn't properly seal it, and also sometimes they don't send the notification to Albany. So so you need to get a copy of the actual sealing order from the court that says your case is sealed, and then you need to send a copy of that to DCJS. I got them to they basically like created a letter when I asked them to do this, that you can send to say, please confirm that you actually did what you're supposed to do automatically. And that's important because if you're getting a background check done and they have not sealed it in DCJS's system, the record will show up because that's where background checks come from for a lot of jobs. Background checks for some jobs come from the court system, so it needs to be sealed in both places. So you have to do that follow-up stuff. Next slide. All right, so what does sealing mean? Eli was talking about expungement, and the reality is that it's very complicated what the difference is between sealing and expungement. I like to say that sealing hides it and expungement makes it like it didn't happen. In reality, it's more complicated than that, but that's kind of the best way I can explain it. What is sealed under New York's current sealing law is what's listed here, all official records, papers, and these are court records. Those are all sealed, meaning they are no longer accessible to the public. Law enforcement, qualified agencies, which includes district attorney's offices and gun licensing agencies, are all still able to access those records. They're not sealed in their records. There is a law that was passed last year that says if you are applying for a job and they ask you if you have a prior criminal conviction and your case has been sealed, you can answer no on the job application. So unless it's for law enforcement. So again, it's complicated, but generally speaking, you can answer no. It's also illegal for them to ask you that question, but that is for another webinar about employment rights. We won't get into that here. Next slide, Avery. All right, so that's it on the sealing process. Obviously, it is complicated. Please reach out to us if you're interested. The people that are eligible for sealing have had some pretty incredible changes happen in their lives once their records are sealed. So it is worth it to go through the process, especially because there are free legal services available. It is not perfect, and we definitely, as Avery is going to tell you, are working to make it a lot better. But if you think you're eligible, then definitely reach out to us and we can help you through what we have now, because it's better than nothing and it will make a difference in your life. Thanks.
So good evening, everybody. Thanks to Pilar and others for inviting me to be on this panel. And thank you to Mustafa for moderating us this evening. Emma and Eli talked about the laws that exist, right? And they're pretty bad. They're not the greatest, right? But there's hope that things don't have to be the way that they are, right? And that is what we are fighting for. So Clean Slate New York is a statewide coalition that is fighting for legislation that will take automatic expungement further, allowing a path forward for clearing more stale records, right? Our anchor members, all our panelists are members of our anchor group. So shout out to them. We have the Bronx Defenders, Center for Community Alternatives, the Community Service Society of New York, Exodus Transitional Community, Just Leadership USA, the Legal Action Center, the Legal Aid Society, New Yorkers United for Justice, and the Next 100. So those are our groups. We're looking to expand, and we'll be talking about that a little bit further down the line. But these groups have convened to say that actually we need to be doing more when it comes time for expungement in New York, and launched last fall to push for automatic expungement. So just around the scope of need, there's an estimated 2.3 million people in this state that have conviction records. That's about 1 in 7. And what we hear overwhelmingly, so Roy was talking earlier about making sure that we are hearing from folks that are directly impacted and that they are leading this effort. And what we hear from our clients, whether they be at Bronx Defenders, Legal Aid, over at CSS, is that they need record expungement, right? We have sealing, we've had sealing for 3 years, but it's not enough. We've had the New York City Fair Chance Act, that's not doing it, right? What we actually need is for records to be expunged so folks can actually move past the barriers that exist around housing, around employment, education, you name it. Folks are saying that they need expungement to do that. And that's why this campaign was launched, to do exactly that. So what we know is that having a conviction history has lasting and damaging effects and act really as a lifetime barrier to moving ahead. So Roy was talking about perpetual punishment, right? Essentially, if you have a record, it follows you, it's a lifetime sentence, right? It follows you the rest of your life, especially in New York, in a state that claims to be progressive, but our record clearance laws are nowhere near that, and many other laws, but we're here to talk about expungement. So no matter how old, how minor they are, it's still a barrier. And by doing automatic expungement, while it is not the end all be all, it is a fundamental way to address the wrongs of over-policing inside of our Black and Brown communities, excessive prosecution and racial injustice in our criminal legal system, and to reducing the systemic barriers that disproportionately impact low-income individuals of color. So we've been talking the past couple of months around defunding the police, but what we know in a place like New York City, that we have stop and frisk and all these other things, we have a lot of Black and Brown people inside of our city that have a record, and it existed even before then, right? And we need to be automatically expunging those records to help right some of those wrongs, but that's not gonna do it, right? That's not the only thing, but it's a way. So legislative efforts for Clean Slate New York. This past legislative session in 2020, Senator Zelnor Myrie in Brooklyn introduced Senate Bill 8165. It is the first bill that calls for automatic expungement of some of these offenses. It is limited. We're excited. We worked to get it introduced, but we want to do more, right? This time actually calls us to do more, and we need to be doing more. And we're letting our principals do that. So we are working with Senator Myrie as well as folks in the legislature to expand that bill to be introduced for the 2021 legislative session. So that's what we've been working on. And we'll be talking more about that in the fall. And what we know based on the laws that exist already is that if we are to have expungement in this state, it has to be an automatic process, right? Emma talked about the woes that exist around it being an application-based process, right? Hundreds of thousands of folks were eligible. It'll be 3 years in a couple of days, right? In October, and there's only been just a little over 2,000 people that have gotten it. So the process must be automatic. Once the time hits, it happens. We must remove the lifetime conviction qualification barrier so that many more people are eligible for relief. So just saying that you can have 2 convictions in your lifetime is BS, quite honestly. We know that folks have many different histories and that we need to be actually just removing that barrier. We also need to reduce the waiting time period. So 10 years is way too long. We tell folks, you know, you got to get a job when they come back home, or, you know, people want to live on their own, and they can't do that because they have a conviction history, right? So we are saying it needs to be significantly less than 10 years. 10 years is way too long. And we look at other states, they are actually passing record clearance laws that are significantly less than that. And we need to be increasing the categories of offenses eligible for expungement. So like Eli was already saying, right now in New York State, we only have expungement, or automatic expungement for marijuana, right? And we only, in the sealing statute in 16059, there is you can only have a certain type of offense to get sealed, right? So that's misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies. And we know that you can only have 1 felony. So we actually need to be increasing that. and saying that as many offenses as possible that can be for expungement should get expunged. So that is what we're looking at for clean slate for expungement. Because while our laws are nowhere near the best, when we do pass clean slate, it needs to be the best, right? And we need to be shooting for the best to make sure we can get the best laws possible. Next, we had listening sessions across the state virtually because we know we're in a pandemic. Across the state to hear from different constituencies about what expungement should look like, and also just be in dialogue about the barriers that folks are facing. We will be hosting a meeting this fall, so be on the lookout to talk more about what came out of those listening sessions and ways that you can be involved, whether that's your organization or you as an individual, because what we know is we need to make automatic expungement a reality when session convenes in January. And yeah, folks can go on our website, which is www.cleanslateny.org. To stay tuned, we'll be doing some more social media, so getting our own social media account. But yeah, go on our website, learn more about expungement. And yeah, that's what I think I have for Clean Slate. And I'll open it for questions, of course.
Thank you, Avery and Emma. One question I have, and I don't know if this is connected to Clean Slate, is how does this, what is some of the work that's connected to like parole? And is that connected to like expungement? Because I realize, a lot of the members that I work with, they have parole officers that, are instituting all these violations, all these weird violations and rules that are essentially made up. Like I kind of was thinking of it in my mind as like, the parole officer is a fake parent that doesn't do any good for you and just offers you criticism like, oh, you had a drink or whatever. And I don't really know, and I really want to know, I guess, like what's the purpose? Like what does parole lead to? What are the good? And I don't think it has any good, to be honest. So I'm wondering, is that part of the conversation when we talk about expungement? Because to me, parole, as far as I've experienced it, seems completely useless.
So the short answer is it is not part of the conversation in terms of like what clean slate would look like. There aren't changes to parole in the clean slate bill. There are a lot of conversations about what you're saying about parole and our concerns about parole. I think parole reform is something that really needs to happen. It's certainly part of the perpetual punishment that is inflicted on people. I've had clients, dozens of clients really, that have said, I'd rather sit in jail than be on parole. It's easier to just sit in jail and wait out my sentence. That's how bad it is. So it's horrible, and people are dealing with it when they get out. So it's certainly part of what we're talking about. Can clean slate fix that? Probably not, unfortunately. But I do think it needs to be part of the broader conversation about the punishment and about how we need to rethink the criminal system and rethink how we can actually facilitate people getting out of prison and leading the full lives that they deserve when they get out, instead of still being watched over by these fake parents. That's actually a really good description.
And Mustafa, I'll just say there are separate bills and campaigns surrounding parole reform, including the Less is More campaign. So I think there are different efforts to address that outside of clean slate, because as you raised, and as Roy mentioned, it creates this perpetual system of punishment, and it needs to be reformed.
And to add on to that, when you're thinking of parole, who controls parole and supervised release is the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, DOCCS. So they are like the ultimate, like if you will, the grandparents of the parents. And they are the ones that are like laying down things. And for a long time, people have been fighting parole because it's its own separate entity. It has their own separate rules. As we mentioned, within the first 3 years, people are being catched in the web of reincarceration not because of new crimes, but because of parole violations. and a lot of them are not crimes. So I think that, like, and when you talk about expungement, I feel like the expungement bill needs to be addressed universally, and they need to create this bill. Then I think parole, as Eli mentioned, unless there's more campaigns going on, but I actually think it needs to be dismantled completely. Right? The purpose of parole is accountability. So when you think of parole like you think of bail. The purpose of bail is just to hold you accountable that you come back to court. That's it. So the purpose of parole is to make sure you what? Report to parole officer, meet your criteria so you don't what? Go back to jail. But in turn, what has happened has been a shift, and the parole officers realize their power, so they use that in many different ways to hold over people's head, A. And then B, they aren't sensitive enough to understand the challenges and barriers that people are facing when they're coming home to try to get employment. All the parole officers saying to them, a lot of cases, is get a job or else. And the or else is you're getting violated and you're doing 24 months and you got to deal with it. So like, it's a separate conversation when it comes to expungement, but it all is relevant. Like, this bill around expungement needs to address every crime, no matter what the crime, because we should not be in a place where we continue to classify crimes as far as violent and nonviolence. We need to get to the place where we're talking about helping people. People make mistakes. People make bad decisions. So in turn, this system was created to hold us accountable. We know the system is not only holding us accountable, but the system is actually damaging us. It's making us worse in a lot of different cases, because we're going to prison, we're being misdiagnosed, we're being given philanthropic meds, we come home, now we're physically dependent or mentally dependent on a drug, which ultimately can lead us to being like a Khalif Browder, right? So like, a lot of different things that associated, when you look at it, it's all weaved together. It's just like all different parts, but it's all relevant when we're thinking about the criminal legal system. It was created to what? Continued forced labor, which is modern day slavery. So like, all these things we have, when we know them, is one thing, and we've known them for a long time. But the question is, when the hell are we going to start dismantling? When are we going to start reimagining what it looks like to hold people accountable? And like, we have these countries around the world that are living, breathing examples of what it looks like to not have a 30-foot wall in Norway, not have a 15-foot fence in Germany. Like, these governments have understand that the harm they've caused to people, especially Germany, that they can never replicate that. And because until we get to the place where America has admitted the harm it has caused on communities of color, to be continued.
Can I add something too to what you said? One thing that we forget also is that a lot of women are getting what is that? Skip my mind. You got me, Pilar. You got me.
Incarcerated?
No, not incarcerated. When they snip.
Oh, they're sterilizing.
So they use prisons as a way to play with our bodies, and they have all the rights to do so, because you're in jail, you have nothing, you can't say anything, you're less than a person. So a lot of our people are going through those things in ICE facilities. The whistleblower that just came out talking about this ovary doctor, that's what they call him, or whatever they call this guy. So oftentimes we forget those conversations of how they mutilate our bodies in jail.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, on top of all the other things, but part of the reason why I'm part of National Expungement is I've been affected by many ways when it comes to all different systems, whether it's the housing court, the criminal court, whatever court, police, being Latina, being a loud Latina, being Pilar la Problema. When I was involved in a situation last year that required me to spend some time on Rikers Island, and there were so many things wrong, especially when it came to women. Women were not being arraigned in the same process that men were, so they were there, pregnant women. But one thing just related to how, like, the medical part, and I know it's kind of off expungement, but it's all, again, related, like Roy said, they took like 6 things of blood, and I'm only there for bail, and I had the bail already at my arraignment, but because the process is so stupid, I had to go to Rikers because there's also no women facilities in the state, in the boroughs. So I was forced to go to Rikers. It's like they couldn't keep me in the arraignment court for some reason. And then because the DA is not available at a certain time and you have to have your money clean, blah, 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 I had to go to Rikers. But they took like 5 things of blood and I was like, what is this for? That's one instance. At one point, the woman accused me of being pregnant and used that, maybe alcohol caused me to forget, but it was really that they forgot, like not that they forgot, their computers were messed up. So it wasn't that I was pregnant, and I knew I wasn't because I've been celebrating, unless I was Jesus or something. Mary, mother of Jesus, Mary, the mother, Mary, Magdalene. And so it's just really crazy. And again, I could talk on. And most of the women that were there were all there for nonviolent crimes. And I also spoke to a woman who said she would rather be in prison because of her criminal records have caused her to not be able to have employment or housing. So at least in prison, she has housing and food, even though it's not the best of food. And also, one more thing, going to expungement, and I'm still in the process of fighting my case. Even though I'm not guilty of the crime, because also what's really important for people who are watching this, especially young people, and especially people who come from Black and brown backgrounds in our culture, at least in my culture, I've always been taught, one, not to go to jury duty. And I think when we're trying to talk about like what's the first step to prevent our people from even reaching the point where they have to fight for an expungement, we need to be getting our people on. We need to be on those juries, because right now, if I wanted to go to trial, but because in Manhattan jury pool, it's not my peers. And so I would have definitely risked going to prison because of the charge came with an automatic 8 years. I would have risked going to prison because, again, I would have found guilty, but I'm not guilty. So I had to plead guilty. That would have created a misdemeanor that would have affected my housing. So I had to go through all these, I'm still going through them, these hoops to get my record expunged so that then my cooperative that's been in my family for 60 years and I've lived here for almost 40, so it doesn't get taken away. I was very blessed to work for I'm very blessed to work for an organization, Take Root Justice, that, when they found out what happened to me, all the attorneys, got on board and were there at my arraignment, got letters. Assemblyman Harvey Epstein, was also kind enough to provide a letter to try to avoid me to go to get bail, but because of the system. But again, we really have to again, talking about changing, we have to get on those juries. We have to think that's like a first step. I'm waiting for jury duty to call me. They don't want me though. So be quiet now.
Thank you. One thing that I think that that's really important about what you just shared, Pilar, is how much there's these personal impacts and how that doesn't necessarily get talked about, right? When we, especially at this particular moment when we're hyper politicized and we're looking at Republicans versus Democrats, and we know all the craziness that's attached to Republicans. But to be honest, I don't really see, I see criminal justice and the work that we're trying to do is like, I don't see a lot of electeds taking leadership. I see some individual electeds, but I don't see like, oh, the Democrats are so on our side when it comes to this. And in fact, as we know, the history of, the current Democratic nominee, there's a history of like a lot of the stuff that we're trying to fight is stuff that Democrats and elected officials who claim to be on the left have pushed forward. So all of that is to say, do y'all find hope? Do y'all see either nationally or someplace where, where you actually see like actual like fascism and all of that and that whole violent show, but you also have the reality that a lot of these laws came from Democratic establishments and Democratic administrations. So all of that was my way of saying, where do y'all see hope? Where do you see possibility in this political climate, not just in New York, but nationally? And if you don't see possibility, I feel you.
I see hope because I'm an organizer. And I believe that we got to be tearing down systems and building new systems at the same time. But when I look at our comrades in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that pushed for folks like Black Visions Collective, Black folks, queer folks, trans folks standing up and saying, actually, we need to be abolishing the police and pushing the city council to do that, there's hope, right? When I see folks in Oakland, California, at the Black Organizing Project that got to remove the police out of the school system, that's hope, right? And when I see all those campaigns that are happening, folks hitting the streets every day, folks will probably be hitting the streets tonight, folks are already in the streets tonight, that's hope, right? And, you know, like for me, like whether it's a Democrat or whether it's a Republican, we're still going to organize. And it's, you know, like folks talk about the lessers of two evils, they're both evil, right? The system is evil. The system is not broken. The system is operating in the way in which it is designed. But folks like Ella Baker say, we who believe in freedom shall not rest. So when I see the folks that's on this call, there's hope, right? And we will continue to turn up on the state and turn up and organize to get the systems that we want. And like for elected officials, if you're not doing your job, like we will kick you out, right? We will register folks to vote because that's the system that we have, whether folks believe in it or not. It is the tool that we can utilize, right? It's electoral politics is a tactic. It's not a full-on strategy. So, you know, we use that and we organize to get the systems that we want. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm going to continue to organize, whether it is today, whether it is 50 years from now, right? We continue to organize until we get the system that we want, where folks are free.
You know, can I just say something to Mustafa very directly? And thank you, Avery, for really framing that in that fantastic way. Because Mustafa, 20 years ago, fears did not exist. And you know, you are actually example of the hope that exists in that community. And I remember when Fierce was being formed, and I think you were still at Brotherhood Sister Soul, weren't you? When we were doing all the anti-criminal justice work back in the days, books not bars, you know, juice just work. And now look at that, 20 years strong, Fierces. So there is hope. There's hope amongst us in our communities. We're still gathering, we're still talking, we're still forming better systems. We're working with our community. We're creating our susus, our sociedades. We're helping each other. We're feeding each other. We're not letting this system take us down. So, I mean, you are actually a manifestation that there's hope in the community. So, para que, you know, so that you understand, that's where the hope is. Do not look for hope in leadership. You have to always look for the hope amongst us. And I just wanted to just remind you that you are actually the manifestation of that hope, my friend. So, you know, ahí estoy completa.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
One thing I would just say too is that a lot of these issues that we're talking about they're local issues. They're state level. You know, the criminal legal system, it's really controlled by the state level legislation. The federal government doesn't have that much to do with the criminal legal system in each particular state. So as bad as things are on the national level and as depressing as things are, you know, we can focus and we can have a real impact. And we've seen that even over this summer, laws that we were told were never going to pass, repealing 50A, police accountability measures. You know, we were told earlier this year they weren't going to pass. And then you had people demanding that they do pass, that something happened, and it does happen. So these are local issues, and we have power over local issues. And, you know, that's why I'm hopeful in that sense.
Other questions? Thank you all for putting it back on organizing, because I do see that organizing often gets used by, you know, elected officials, and we have to claim it, and we have to be clear about how we take all that's around us. Other questions or comments from the panel?
I think there's a couple of raised hands in the panelists or in the participants.
Yeah, we're trying to be very careful with that, but I guess I'm going to allow Sandra Rivera to speak and ask her question. So Sandra, you have the mic.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know if you can see me, but I have a question. I know a woman that was born and raised in the Bronx, and she moved out of the city, and then she came back, and she was like they say, try to get any employment was better than no employment. And she decided to get like a store, kind of go to Macy's, go to Bloomingdale's, you know, just to find employment. She did have a record, which for over 10 years, she's been trying her best to stay out of trouble and just take odds and end jobs, and was very successful until she found out that, excuse me, that she was sick with type 2 diabetes, and it was making it difficult for her to keep working. So my question for women like that had one incident or one, you know, case, has been sitting around for over 10 years trying to clear it, and she just doesn't know how to do the paperwork and everything. I've seen other attorneys, for example, that have tried to help, but they weren't successful because it's not in New York, as in other states that have these serious problems with people that have one family or, you know, just had a problem. So I'm curious, as now I have a bigger responsibility, because I feel that as a president of an organization that can help other women, we are now 9 states of women. And the organization is the National Conference of Puerto Rican Women. The New York chapter, we have 9 states. What can we do to help this organization or other organizations that are fighting Washington, D.C.? Can anyone try to help me with how I feel? You know, I have a criminology degree. For example, I always was concerned about my community and their issues with criminals versus non-criminals. So clear slate, I'm going to read more about this organization, but I'm also concerned about so many people that are out there trying to be released after 10 years of not doing any criminal actions in the city or in the states. What can we do?
Well, I'll just say, Sandra, doing exactly what you're doing now, like attending these forums, getting information, getting educated about what you can do, that's a big first step. But the bottom line is this, is that there is no one solution for this problem. We have to attack the issues on so many fronts, on a local, on a state level, city level, personal level, as communities, as immigrants, as, you know, whatever our identity. So, yeah, but like we put in the chat, like, please send your information so that to the New York, to the email that Pilar posted on the chat, so that we can continue to build on this, because nothing can ever be accomplished without us understanding what the issues are and how to fight it, because that's how oppression works. That's how white supremacy works. They keep us fighting each other, fighting all these little battles and not going for the big future. And it's time that we start talking more often to each other so that we can tackle the issues as we see them and build and rebuild the community, the world that we want to be in. So that's what I say. Just exactly what you're doing right now, like getting more people involved in honest, genuine, factual discussion.
And I'll add on to that.
Thank you.
I'll add on really briefly as well, because you mentioned legislation, but also you kind of spilled into DC. So you mentioned kind of like state and federal. So first you have to understand those are 2 fundamentally different things, as was mentioned by Eli. Most people are not in the federal system. It's less than 200,000 people or so who are locked up in the federal system. The other 2 million are locked up in state facilities, jails, you name it, right? So I think that the organization, I think first it needs to be clarity as far as if they're doing federal legislation or local and state legislation, because they're 2 different places you're going to be going. Either you're going to be going to Albany or you're going to DC. So I think that there needs to be clarity around that. But there's always organizing going on in DC around a lot of different things. I can actually plug you into somebody who I know who works for the National Disability Organization down there, who are always doing things in DC. But ultimately, it takes people power, right? Like it takes a lot of people power and influencing legislators and constituent, the influence of the constituents of the legislators, meaning the neighborhoods in the state, because it might more likely is going to probably be a statewide campaign. So that means if it's a statewide campaign, you have to visit all around New York State, Long Island, Suffern, all over the place. And you need to have conversations with people in all these different towns to find out what their issues are. But also, more importantly, you want to elevate their voices. You want to create listening sessions to have them share what is happening on a local level, so it all ties into what's happening overarchingly across the state. So if the organization is focused on like the state policy wise, you're on the call right now with a bunch of people who's working in the state. As far as a national perspective, it's different. But I know we have connections with people who are doing stuff in DC. So I just wanted to just put that out there. But as was mentioned, there is no one way to fix the criminal legal system. Think of it as a monster, one big beast, right? And think about you being on one side of this beast and all of us on one side and pulling and pulling and pulling. And then on the other side, we know we got people that are just like us that are doing the same job. And ultimately, the goal is to dismantle the beast by like what? Destroying the beast by us pulling hard as hell, by us pushing policy, by us providing resources and opportunity to people who are in the communities that are struggling, but also elevating their voices and not elevating their voices for free, I might add. But what does it look like to compensate people for them to share their stories as well? Because every time some people share their story, they're re-traumatizing themselves. And we don't never think about that. We only think, oh, just come share your story or come tell us what happened to you. And we don't realize like, oh, this person, how did he get here? Did they even did they have to like jump the turnstile? Did they eat today? Did they these are the things as us as advocates and us as attorneys and work for law firms have to be tuned in with just people, right? Yes, I just got to come speak and testify at this hearing, but did I ask him how is he going to get there? Did I ask him if he ate today? Did I ask him how he's getting home? These are things we need to think about. And when we start doing more of that, then I think we'll get more trust from the people, because I think a lot of policy organizations don't have a lot of trust of the people because they aren't doing direct service. So a lot of times there's a big disconnect. So that's all I want to chime in and say.
Yeah, I definitely yes to all of that. And Sandra, again, something we have to start in our communities, and we talked about this on the webinar on Saturday, and if folks are interested in having a copy of that, which was an amazing webinar with other folks who have been really also criminalized when it comes to all the systems, we talked about also, the violence behind calling police. So much of us are like, call the police for this, call the police for that. So we have to really start thinking alternative ways and really rebuilding and healing the community, which is also what part of this is. We really need to heal from a lot of the trauma that people have endured, whether it is going to prison or just living in the community and facing eviction and losing employment, or whatever the barriers that are constantly against us. And so I think that we really have to start remembering that police are not the saviors, in my opinion. And we have to really work as a community and really understand what the root of the problem is. People are not born killers, criminals. The system has capitalism, and these systems have created that. Like I mentioned, if you have all these barriers that are preventing you from rebuilding, from building generational wealth in your family, if you have all those barriers, what do? There's a time where you may have to just do what's illegal, quote unquote, which also is really interesting because so many people in government, not all, but there are a lot of folks in government who have done some corrupted things, in my opinion. We see NYPD being allowed to get away with murder in many cases, and that's across the nation. And so we really need to start coming together as a community, not judging one another based on, what we had to do to survive, and I think that that's really important too when we want to talk about what do we need to do. We have to, it's hard because a lot of us come with this also generational trauma that we don't recognize. And
Can I add on something? I think so. The first thing is I think that when it comes from a community perspective, there needs to be a lot of social and emotional learning, a lot of therapeutic, a lot of therapists that needs to be poured into our communities. Because first we need to get past the taboo that if you're a person in therapy, you're MO, you're 730, you're this, you're that. And at the end of the day, we all need therapy, especially now. Like, especially based off of how this world is operating, what's happening in our neighborhoods. It seems like every time you go outside now, you might need a gun. So, like, it's real. This is what's happening all around us, and it can happen anywhere, any place, anytime, right? So knowing that, it's like, okay, I'm gonna do. So when you make a conscious decision to do this work, as I always like to tell people, there is no cutoff switch. There is no 9 to 5, and that's it. Like, people are gonna call you all kind of hours. You're gonna be engaged with this. It's gonna stress you out. But at the end of the day, we're doing this work for the people, and we are like the physical representations of those people. And a lot of them don't have our platform. So for me, it's always about how do we elevate the people's argument, issues, grievances, gripes, so that the elected officials now can like speak to the people. Because at the end of the day, I think that a lot of times elected officials go towards the, as we know, the money kind of filters their decision making. But we need to continue to elevate the people, as we mentioned about hope. Hope is only going to continue to happen when we continue to unify and galvanize people and like be on one accord. Yes, it's challenging to like grasp the understanding of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris possibly being the next president and vice president. I'm still trying to figure that out. But we still have to hold them accountable no matter who's in office. And I tell people this, and I'm going to shut up after this. If there's one thing Trump might have shown us, and that's this. I believe this. So this is a controversial statement, but I believe it. I personally believe that if Trump did not win the election, a lot of us would have laid back and put our feet up, and we wouldn't have been holding people in power accountable. I think what Trump has done has allowed people who are openly practice racism to come out.
You muted yourself.
What he's allowed is people to galvanize in numbers unheard of against them, right? So I think that ultimately we need to take this people power and keep pushing and hold Republicans, Democrats, independents. I don't care who we put in power. People have an agenda. So we got to hold people accountable. We have to. And if, like as was mentioned earlier, if you're not doing what we put you there for, we're voting your ass out. We have a generation right now that's radical as hell, that don't care, and they're going to be voting. So like that's where we at with it. So the old way of business is over.
I mean, I think one other thing too is, crime, the real crime is being poor, right? If you're rich, if you got money, you literally could do whatever you want on TV, make shows about it and all of that. I have a quick legal question, because I have a lot of members who have issues with like child support and like, literally getting their kids taken because they don't have a job and they're homeless. So I'm wondering, from some of the folks who have legal expertise, what are the options for people, right? Like I found out someone that I know has back child support, but has been homeless and unemployed for several years. Are they going to go to jail? Like, or should I just put them in contact with you all? I'm just wondering, because it is something that has just been brought to my attention recently with COVID. Some people are getting unemployment, but then, the government then finds out, oh, you owe child support, pay child support by, October, for example.
Can I answer that?
Well, okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. And then we wanted to let the attorneys answer that. But sure, go ahead, Sandra.
Okay. I worked for child support for over 24 years. And I can say this, that anyone that has a hardship or a change of financial circumstances in their household, loss of income or lack of income, all they have to do is petition the family court in their borough and put in a dispute. They can petition the courts and tell them that they have a hardship or they lost their job, whatever the circumstances are. And the judge will, listen to your case, but you have to have sufficient proof showing that you've been searching for employment. You got to have a list where you've been, what address, what telephone. So like that, if the judge wants to check your list out, you have sufficient proof of your hardship. Now, I've been doing this at 151 West Broadway for over 24 years, and right now that office is closed, but their 888 number is still working, and people can call.
Thank you, Sandra.
And Sandra, I don't know if you have experience with this as well, but it's my understanding that people can also, if they do feel like they have the ability to make some payments, they can also work out a payment plan directly with child support without necessarily having to go through the court. But Mustafa, I will say that there are issues with family court. There's a lot of issues with ACS. Bronx Defenders, we deal with that all the time. We have family court, family defense attorneys. And there are bills too that we hope to get passed to give parents more rights, because anybody who's experienced the family court situation knows how racist it is and how lawless it is, really. And as you said, the penalty is just being poor. If you're poor, you're looked upon differently. If you're a rich mother who's smoking marijuana, you do whatever you want. If you're a poor mother, your kids get taken from you. So there's activism, there's organizing around that stuff as well, because it's not just the criminal system, it's the family system, all these other systems.
Thank you, Eli.
And
Are there
also,
other
to add to
questions,
that as well,
comments?
Mustafa, also another consequence to that as well as with child support is the person not being able to drive. So now that removes another opportunity for a person to be employed in driving, possibly driving a truck or whatever. Your license is now suspended pending that as well. So that's another example of like how it can impact one area, but ultimately it can impact so many other areas, which costs you your livelihood. So now if you're a grown man and you go on 50 job interviews and you can't get a job, ultimately you'll get to the place where you get frustrated and you might do something that is like for you warranted, right? But for other people, you'll look and judge them and be like, oh, why you just didn't do the right thing? But you are not in that person's position. So I always tell people, until you know people's story, their experience, and what they face, then you can't really be the one that's judging them. So yes, it also impacts that people from driving and not being able to drive when it comes to family court and child support.
And then also, like, they seize your account. So if you're looking for a job and they have direct deposit only, like, how you gonna get paid if you don't have a bank account? So it's like, it's so fucked up. Excuse my language.
Yeah, I can't see my niece right now because of my case, and it's a really stupid thing. But I haven't seen her in person for, I think we're almost at 600 days.
Wow. So we got about 5 more minutes. I just want to open it up to any closing reflections, comments. I know I have a lot to think about and a lot of things to digest. So final words of wisdom from anyone on the panel.
I mean, I'll, before we close, I mean, if other defenders have any, or anyone from the panel, or anyone, or Tamika Map, I know if you'd like to say something, give you a few minutes before we close out. Tamika Map is the state committee woman here in East Harlem. I know Tamika very well, because I live in East Harlem. I've also, for another fact, I've ran for office twice, but Tamika's been running for many positions in this community and, a leader here in East Harlem for a long time. And so just before we wrap up, I'd like to give her a few minutes to just say a couple of words.
Perfect. Thank you, Pilar. Hi, guys. It's nice meeting you guys and everything. I just want to say, wow, for the last couple of days, I learned a lot. Learned a lot of bills that needs to be up in the forefront to change because I'm a system changer. I'm not just organizing. My most takeaway to anybody is organize, organize, organize. Sorry for bringing the phone in the background. Organize as much as you can, no matter how many people tell you no, get back out there and organize again. When the door could close in your face, organize again, because organizations is going to make the systems change. Because right now we need systems change, and we need as much people that's willing to change the system and have a backbone standing up and saying the system is not working. We need to overhaul and we need to think about something new. So for those who don't know, I run a not-for-profit called Progressive Educating New Yorkers. It's all about giving people that's been incarcerated a second chance of a career in the insurance field. So we actually train them how to be independent insurance agents and brokers for a 24-week program to see if that's going to be a fit for them. Not everybody is going to like being in insurance, so it's like you said, Roy, give them an opportunity to learn the field before they commit and say they're going to do it. And then after that 24 weeks, they decided that they want to become independent insurance agents and brokers. We're going to get them licensed. It's a free program. The participants don't have to pay for anything. We're going to actually get them licensed and they can be able to work and have a career. If they decided that entrepreneurship is for them, then they'll be able to have their own cooperative insurance agency within the 5 boroughs of New York City. So this organization's been up for 3 years. It's open for anybody between 18 and 40 years old. I extended it. It used to be 24, but I'm coming across a whole bunch of 30-year-olds, 35-year-olds, 40-year-olds to say, hey, what about me? So I extended to include everybody from 18 to 40. I'm the state committee woman in the district. I'm all about change, so make sure you get at me if you need help with anything, pushing everything, moving anything. I'll be right there fighting for you, because expungement and holistically reimagining the way our families is very important to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tamika. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining both of our webinars. And before we close out, I just again want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank Legal Aid. I want to thank Bronx Defenders. I want to thank CSS Community Service Society. I want to thank Mustafa. I want to thank Fierce. I want to thank Yesenia for Canna Coven. I want to thank Freedom, aka Hector, aka Blue Dream Radio. I want to thank all the interpreters that, the 2 interpreters that are here. Thank you very much. Thank you, people from New York City Normal. Thank you to the Start Smart Coalition. Thank you to Canaware Society. Thank you to CB Council. We do this work and it takes a lot of work. It looks pretty easy right now, but I'm going to be very honest, it is a lot of work, and everyone is dealing with a lot of things. I want to also thank, Baba Israel. He's not here, but for sharing his music. I want to thank Take Root Justice, who is an organization I work with, but my colleagues have been a part of this process. I want to make sure I get everyone, so sorry. Before we go, I just want to say my thank yous. I want to thank the Office of Assemblyman Harvey Epstein. Thank you, Tamika Mapp, for being here. The NYU Cannabis Network. I want to thank a lot of our panelists that were with us Saturday. So the Confined Arts, Alejandra Pablos, Chocolate Brown, the TA Association for Washington Houses. Again, everyone, and if I missed you, I'm sorry. If there are questions that you have relating to your record, please send an email to NY, and again, as the attorney's not too specific, send an email to ny@nationalexpungementweek.org. Also, please just give us time, because we are, like I mentioned, coordinating these events has taken a lot, so now we just have to coordinate a system for us to process this information to the defenders. So I promise you, if you send an email, you don't hear right away, just understand you will, it's just we got to figure out a proper system so that we could adjust this. And again, if you have questions, folks have shared their information in the chat. If you haven't, please do. I'm going to also share, save the chat, so if there's information here that is needed, I could resend it to folks who email me. If you want a copy of this video, please email me and I will share the link to where you could find it. We're working to get it on YouTube. I know I'm forgetting something. National Expungement Week, again, is not just a week, it's an all year round. As we know, these things are happening all day long, every day. Right now, today I got my first ticket for not paying my fare on the bus. And yeah, it was unfortunate because it was by a Black young man. But it was important for him to hear what I had to say to him, especially on a day like today. So I'll take that ticket and I'm going to fight it, and I'll come back later on to tell you how that worked out. But again, thank you so much to everyone who's here. And if I forgot you, please don't take it personal. There's all love. And again, one other thing before I close, remember, folks, especially to my defenders, organizers, everyone here actually, remember to self-care. I myself have that problem. It is very challenging for me, and I'm learning little by little because I've hit burnout, and I'm trying again to really practice it. So I want to encourage, because this work is not easy, and then our lives are not right now are like challenging. So, and the work, especially, again, all of us here do a lot of great things. The work, especially with the defenders and organizers, like they're literally the person who are absorbing this energy, not only the energy of the really bad system, but everything, the yuckiness, that's for lack of a better term. So please, guys, and organizers, everyone, please practice self-care. Yeah. And if anyone else has anything to say besides that, if folks could turn on their cameras, though, this is my last request. Before we officially end this, I'd like to get a photo. And if you can't get your camera on,
Breonna Taylor still has no justice.
There's a lot of no justice for a lot of folks, and so that's why we got to continue fighting. But if we don't take care of ourselves, we cannot help anyone else. That's what I got to keep reminding myself. All right, so I don't want to hold people's times. If you cannot get on camera, okay, but let's just say Expungement Week, and I'm gonna forget it. So peace, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and we'll be in touch. And thank you, folks, for joining here, people who have signed up. And again, if you want to share, just reach out to ny@nationalexpungementweek.org, and we'll get you this video. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Pilar. Good job.
Bye.
And all the organizers.
Thank you, Pilar.
Thank you, Pilar. You rock, yo. You killed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Oh, wait,
you.
I gotta